Young lad. Righteous. War can't buy great. Then craftsman so full of technique. Make him feel like someone good and then alright. Show up at them night, cause we hard clean. Enough of them say them a do it, but them not do it like we. On them know for what them hear about. Warrior they are to what them hear about. Open up it, they can make it hear out. Anybody not the way them a feel clear out. Like switched up.
Hey guys, today I present What If Atreus Was in High School DxD Part 1. Please like, share and subscribe, and also follow my Instagram account. The link is in the description. Now please enjoy.
Beep, 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 B-dash. The sound of a hand smashing, almost breaking, an alarm clock resounded throughout the decent-sized bedroom. A groan erupted before a head of brown hair poked out from underneath the white sheet, but the person immediately threw it back on in discomfort when the rays of blinding luminescence of the early morning sun hit them in the eyes, which flickered open very briefly. It had been 4 months since he had arrived in this new world, and Atreus, known as Loki by the Jotnar, still couldn't get over how bright the sun was. Damn it, Skull, just catch the damn sun already. Also, it was clear that he was not much of a morning person. Grunting slightly, the son of the former Greek god of war slowly sat up in his bed, rubbing the sleepiness out of his eyes as he stifled a yawn with one hand, before stretching himself out with his hands, raising his hands high into the air. Slowly but surely, however, Atreus was able to get out of bed and made his way into the bathroom, to get himself ready for yet another day of his new life. Atreus did not waste any time to get into the shower, not even bothering to wait for the water to heat up. The cold had never bothered him, at least not anymore after he had survived Helheim numerous times, and lived through Fimbulwinter. Atreus stayed under the water for nearly 5 minutes, doing nothing more than simply standing there with his eyes closed as he let the cold water caress his form, scarred from the numerous battles he had fought. After he had collected his thoughts and felt that his body had fully woken up, the young god quickly got to the actual cleaning, which was fast. Once that he was done, Atreus turned the shower off and stepped out, grabbing a clean white towel hanging off the rack and proceeding to partially dry his hair, then his body, before wrapping it around his waist. He then walked over to the sink, and grabbed a toothbrush to brush his teeth, staring at himself in the mirror. At 17 years of age, Atreus was honestly pleased with what he saw. Back when he had his first adventure with his father, he had been very short, with the dwarven brothers Brock and Sindri being even taller than he was. In the past few years, however, he had hit a great growth spurt, and managed to grow to a nice height for a young man his age. Sure, he wasn't as tall as his father yet, but he was taller than the other kids in town, not to mention more muscular. That had to count for something. Grabbing another towel, Atreus used it to clean his face and then headed out of the bathroom finally to get dressed in the uniform of a local high school, which, in his honest opinion, was one of the strangest things he had ever worn, consisting of a black blazer over a black, long-sleeved shirt with black highlights and a black ribbon on the collar and matching black pants. Well, time to go to school, I guess. Saying that to himself, Atreus wasted no more time to make his way out of his room, grabbing his backpack along the way before walking down the staircase that led down to the first floor of his new house, skipping the final 3 steps of the staircase with a jump. Arriving at the kitchen, the young god/Jotnar smiled at the head of an old man with grey beard and horns sitting on the dining table poking a tablet with a pen he was holding with his mouth, a disturbing sight for those who did not know its story, and greeted him. "Morning, Mimir." "Ah, morning, lad." Mimir, the smarter man alive, or at least what was left of him, greeted Atreus cheerily, dropping the pen in his mouth to speak with the young god as he walked over to the refrigerator to find something to eat for breakfast. "How are you today? Ready to go to school?" "I am," Atreus replied as he stood up with a half-eaten sandwich in his hand. "Did father leave already?" "Why yes. He left 10 minutes earlier. Our employee of the month is a busy man these days," Mimir answered, making them both chuckle at the humor behind his words. Who could have thought that Kratos, the mighty god of war and the feared ghost of Sparta, was now working as a security guard at a local construction site, where he also occasionally helped out with the heavy labor work, doing such a fine job he was given the Employee of the Month awards even. "Well, I better get going then. Atreus said to Mimir as he quickly forced down the last bit of the sandwich and drank a full glass of water. See you in the afternoon. With that said, Atreus headed out, not forgetting to pick up the pen for Mimir and let him hold it in his mouth again. Without a body, it was the only way for the reanimated head of the smartest man alive to use the tablet, which he had been using to surf the internet for knowledge and information, something that had caused Kratos to look at him as if he had just grown a whole body. Don't forget to eat a proper breakfast later when you are at school, lad. Mimir called, making Atreus nod his head in response with a grin before heading out, closing the door and locking it with a special rune magic that would keep any thieves from getting adventurous with their stuff, especially a talking head. 4 months. It had been 4 months since Atreus and his father, and of course Mimir, found themselves in this new world, one of advanced technology, and brimming with life. Adapting was what Atreus and his father did best, and it did not take it long for them to settle down in this country called Japan with some help, having decided that their current best course of action was to blend in and live among the humans, hiding their true nature and who they really were. With his supernatural innate linguistic capabilities, it did not take it long for Atreus to learn to speak numerous languages of this world and taught his father and their bodiless companion to do the same, with Kratos having some difficulty, but at the same time he had been incredibly patient. After a few weeks, Kratos was able to speak Japanese on an acceptable level, though Atreus believed he needed to work on his writing a bit more. Nonetheless, being able to speak their language had allowed the former ghost of Sparta to find a job with the local construction crew, something that both him and Mimir deemed necessary for him to earn them a living in this new world. It had been Mimir who suggested Atreus to enroll in academic study, something that had been an unfamiliar concept to him since he had never gone to school before, and everything that he knew had been taught to him by his mother. Atreus didn't know if it was really necessary, but he had always wanted to know what it felt like to study at a school with kids his age, and it's not like he had anything else to do, so he had enlisted himself into the high school division of Kyo Academy. Not much he knew about Kyo Academy beside the fact that it used to be an all-girls private school but changed to co-ed a couple of years back and used a system that was called Escalator, which made it a school for all grades from first university separated by elementary, junior high, senior high, and college divisions. With the exception of the special entrance test that Atreus had had to do to enlist himself, there was no need for the traditional entrance exams so long as students maintain a respectful grade above average, something that Atreus had shown on his first day at the place that he would have no problem doing. The academy itself was a breathtakingly beautiful campus, consisting of several buildings with the main one being a long, rectangular structure that was 4 stories tall, with slanted roofs, reddish-brown tiles and built like some kind of traditional European architecture. Or at least it was what he thought. His knowledge on the history of this world was still in development, and it's not like he would just sit still and spend all of his time every day surfing the internet like Mimir to speed up the process. It's Atreus. He's so handsome. You think he is still single? Don't know, but I would still like to take my chance with him. And of course, by the time that Atreus had arrived at the academy, he heard the girls whispering to themselves the same exact words he had been hearing almost every day, and did not need to look or use his sense to know that some of them were excited to see him. And some were even horny. His father wanted him to not cause unnecessary attention, but from the first moment he stepped foot into Kyo Academy, a place where the girls outnumbered the boys by 8 to 1, he had become the very attention itself, not just from the female students, but also from the males. Damn Casanova, it's bad enough that Kiba got all the attention, now him too. Go die, damned pretty boy. Fuck off, you damn gaijin. Oi. I know what that word means, you know. Atreus scoffed, throwing the group of male students on his left a firm glare, making them back off away immediately in fear. Sighing and taking a deep breath, the son of Kratos continued to advance toward his classroom, ignoring the half-fearful/half-hateful glare of the male students, and the adoring looks of the girls. He did, however, feel someone eyeing him in a different manner from afar and turned his head toward the old school building to look. He did not see anyone, but the window of the room on the top floor was wide open, though he didn't really care if someone was there. That was close, said Ria's Gremory as she peeked her head up from behind the window frame. For a girl that was 17 years of age, she had an hourglass body that surpassed even that of a top-class supermodel, with a large bust catching the eye of most hormonal teenagers. Her blue-green eyes were like the most beautiful crystals that had stolen many feeble hearts, but above everything else about her, her beautiful, flowing crimson hair that covered her back like a curtain of red silk, was no doubt her most beautiful and noticeable feature. "Ara, did our new foreign student almost catch you staring at him again, but you?" Ria's best friend and the vice president of the Occult Research Club, a beautiful with an incredible voluptuous body and very long black hair with violet eyes, Kuno Hyamjima, asked with an amused smile on her face as put a cup of tea down the table in the middle of the room. Much like Ria's, Kuno was an incredibly beautiful young woman with a voluptuous figure, very long black hair and violet eyes. Her hair was tied in a long ponytail, reaching all the way down to her legs with two strands sticking out from the top and sloping backward, with an orange ribbon keeping it in place. Like her friend and most of the girls at QO Academy, she wore the customary QO Academy girls' school uniform, along with black calf-length socks. "I swear, if he suddenly does that again I will have to use magic to cover myself," Riaz said as she stood up and walked over to the lounge to sit down, smiling at her friend gratefully before picking up her cup of tea to take a small sip. "There's just something weird about him, don't you think?" "Ara, isn't that what you think all the boys are, Riaz?" Kano giggled softly into her hand. "Not that kind of weird. He's weird in our way, the supernatural way." Riaz shook her head and said, correcting herself before her friend could tease her any more. "I mean, how many people can detect me the moment I look at them from a distance?" Kano nodded her head in understanding. "What have you been able to find out about him, Kano?" "Honestly, not much. He lives in a house not far from here with his father, who is said to be a security guard at a local construction site. The man is said to have caught 3 armed thieves just this week alone, bare-handed." Kano said with a small hum of amusement. "Atreus is also doing exceptionally well in his class. Some teachers are even calling him a genius, and considering letting him take the graduation test early to move to college. He's doing even better than Sonakichu, I believe." "Now that is something you won't be able to hear every day," Riaz stated with a slight sense of amazement in her tone. Some girls also heard him speaking 6 different languages in just a span of a month. Riaz widened her eyes at that, turning her head fully to look at Kano as the black-haired girl continued. "And I also heard he has also seen trying to learn new languages during break times between classes, all by himself." "So, you are saying that he's self-teaching himself different languages?" Kano nodded her head in confirmation at Reyes, who had a look of surprise on her face. "Some of his classmates also seem to think he's a delinquent because he has tattoos and scars all over his body." The black-haired girl then continued. "I asked Kiba-kun to look into it, and he said Atreus did have a tattoo of words written in Northumbrian runes on the side of his neck." "Northumbrian runes?" Riaz asked with a thoughtful expression. "Is it possible that he is secretly related to the Norse gods in any way?" Given the fact that QO was filled with supernatural entities, she wouldn't be surprised if the new student was one of them. "There's also the thing about his name, as it was obviously Greece." "That's a million-yen question, Riaz," Kuno said, and Riaz couldn't help but nod her head in response before the black-haired girl walked to her bag and took out a stack of documents. "Oh, by the way, these are what I can find about the thing you asked me to look into a few days ago." "Thank you, Kuno," Riaz said gratefully at her best friend as she took the document and put it down before her. Later on, that day, Atreus found himself walking home after school had ended, hands behind his head as he wondered which movies he should watch with his father that night after dinner. Kratos might not show it, but Atreus could tell that his father really enjoyed watching Spartacus, which also gave Atreus the opportunity to bond with his father in something other than life and death situations. Now that they had had a somewhat normal life, maybe the two of them could finally work together to become a normal pair of father and son. But as if fate once again had decided to laugh in his face, Atreus suddenly heard a loud, painful scream coming from the park on his left, and wasted no time to run toward that direction. "Hold on. I am coming," Atreus shouted as he ran as fast as his legs could carry him, even considering ramming through the trees to get there faster, but decided to maneuver between them instead. Years of running in the wild and dodging deadly attacks in the most hazardous environment had made Atreus incredibly light on his feet. Arriving at the fountain area of the park, Atreus widened his eyes when he saw a boy who was dressed in the uniform of his school kneeling on the ground, clutching his bleeding stomach. Standing before him was a black-haired young woman, who was dressed in an ultra-revealing outfit consisted of black leather that encircled around and under her breasts, a thong-like piece held around her hips by 3 thin straps, gloves that ran right up her arms with small lengths of chains hanging from them, shoulder guard-like objects on her shoulders with 3 large spikes sprouting from her right shoulder, and black thigh-high heel boots. However, what surprised him the most was a pair of black feathery wings on her back, and the spear of concentrated light she was holding in her hand. "Hey! Get away from him!" Atreus shouted as he leapt into the air and came crashing down between the two with a knee, forcing the black-winged girl to jump back in surprise. Quickly recovering, Atreus removed the backpack from his back, and threw it at the girl, aiming for her head. Surprised as she was, the black-winged girl snarled and regained her composure, slapping away the backpack before it could hit her face, only to see Atreus throwing a right hook at her cheek, punching her with so much force that he sent her away flying and crashing into the fountain several meters away. "Oi kid, are you alright?" Atreus asked worriedly as he turned to the boy kneeling on the ground, lowering himself down to one knee to check his wound, where the black-winged girl had probably stabbed him. He could see that the boy was losing a lot of blood, and he was slowly losing consciousness. He would be in serious trouble if he wasn't given medical treatment anytime soon. "Hold on to it as tight as you can, I will call you an ambulance." With that said, Atreus took out his mobile phone, an electronic device that would allow him to call and communicate with others from a distance, and wasted no time to dial the emergency number. "You pick a bad time to try and play hero, boy." Before Atreus could raise the phone to his ear, the evil angel girl had already picked herself up and flown at him at blurring speed, her hand holding a much longer, spear-like light weapon that she aimed to drive it through his chest. But once again Atreus was one step ahead of her, as he spun around and grabbed the tip of her spear before it could pierce his chest, stopping her from advancing. "What? How did you?" the evil angel girl asked in shock, as Atreus' hand didn't even appear to be bleeding as he gripped the tip of her sword and forced her down onto her knee with it. "None. What? None your fucking business." Atreus scoffed and smashed his fist down the top of her head, sending her crashing face first into the ground so hard a large spiderweb crater was created, knocking her out cold and making the other boy stumble before falling forward, but Atreus was quick to turn back around and grab him before he could fall down. Seeing that he had passed out, and there was no one else around, Atreus used a quick spell to heal the boy's wound to make sure that he would live long enough till he could receive proper medical treatment, and stood up after putting the other boy on his shoulders. Seeing that the black-winged girl was still breathing, the young god picked her up with one hand and hid her in a nearby bush, before hurriedly taking the boy on his shoulders to the nearest hospital. "No. You can't be serious, Tilda." Mimir, the smartest man alive, or at least that had always been what he claimed to be, exclaimed in shock and amazement as he witnessed the greatest betrayal he had ever seen in his life, in a romantic/comedy/drama movie that he was watching on his personal tablet. "Girl, you just broke my heart." "Wait, that's not right." The head chuckled at his own humor and then turned his full attention back to the movie. Mimir. Just before he could fully indulge himself in the shocking plot of the movie once again, the front door of the house was suddenly kicked open and Atreus came rushing, causing the man to quickly close the movie tab and switch over to a science website to cover up his embarrassing moment. "Ah, welcome back, lad. How's school?" Mimir greeted cheerfully, but stopped when he saw the blood on Atreus' shirt and unconscious girl with black wings on her back that the young god was carrying on his shoulder, causing him to widen his eyes in surprise before asking worriedly, "Oh dear, are you okay, boy? What happened? And who's that on your shoulders?" "I found this woman trying to kill a kid from my school at the park nearby," Atreus answered as he put the black-winged girl down the table while Mimir looked at him to see if there were any wounds. "I'm alright, Mimir. This is not my blood. I carried the other kid to the hospital. The doctors there are taking care of him now." "I see," Mimir said. He would have nodded his head at Kratos' son in approval, as the young god had once again shown his best qualities if he still had a neck. "Mimir, is she what I think she is?" Atreus asked as he washed his bloody hands at the sink and cleaned himself up a bit using a clean towel. "Of course, The first thing that the three of them had done when they first arrived at this world was doing research on the supernatural world, to see if it had one much like his own. To their surprise, and slight disappointment, it did, and existed with each other at the same time, alive and very well. There were the Greek pantheon, the Aesir and Vanir gods of Asgard, Zeus and Athena, Odin and Thor, and many, many other pantheons of divine deities, who had fortunately been spared from the same fates as their counterpart from Atreus and Kratos' world. Mimir would like to believe that the gods of this world were less evil and more reasonable, as they had lived to the day humans had advanced so much in technology and culture, but Kratos' opinions about them continued to remain. But at the same time, they had discovered that this world also had other supernatural factions. Quite possibly, boy, Mimir said as he looked at the unconscious girl on the table, studying her features with his glowing golden eyes. Your father is going to be pleased if he sees her. Where do you think I should take her? The police station? Atreus asked as he walked down the stair with a clean new shirt, having headed up to his room to change. I got to make sure that when she wakes up, she isn't gonna finish what she started, considering that the other boy is possibly still alive. I see. How about we tie her up and dump her in the nearby river? Mimir. Sorry, lad. I was just joking. The head of the smartest man alive chuckled and then gazed longingly at Atreus for a moment before he asked, you have another reason to bring her back here, don't you, boy? Well, yeah. I mean. Atreus shrugged, scratching the back of his head as he tried to avoid Mimir's gaze. I just thought that if we knew more about the other supernatural factions of this world, we would be better at defending ourselves if they, for some reason, wish to pick a fight with us. We already know about the gods of this world, but what about the angels, the devils, or the fallen angel there? I see. I can understand why you decided to do that, boy. Mimir said, humming thoughtfully at Atreus' words. He had expected the boy to have decided to do just that, and could agree with his logic. So what do you want to do now? Let's wait for father to come back or... Ding dong. Before he could finish, the doorbell of his home suddenly rang, making Atreus turn his head and look at the front door cautiously. Who could be coming to their home at this time of the day? His father had his own key to the front door and would just walk in without needing to say a word, so it couldn't be Kratos. Be careful, boy. Mimir said in a low tone after Atreus as the boy slowly walked to the front door and put his hand on the doorknob, waiting patiently for the doorbell to ring again to open it. The person that was waiting for him wasn't who he had expected, but they did not make him feel surprised either. You who? Atreus. Your scary old man isn't home yet, is he? The one who asked that was an otherworldly beautiful and erotically voluptuous woman, with long and wavy flowing blonde hair and large and sky blue eyes. She was dressed in what could have been an elegant evening dress, if the upper half wasn't leaving her enormous breasts on an almost clear display. Each one was larger than her own head and standing high on her chest with gravity-defying weight. The dress also featured a high slit on the side, showing off much of her mile-long legs and thighs, even a portion of her flat and toned stomach as she stood before him on a pair of killer heels with a heart-melting smile on her face. Aphrodite, what the hell are you doing here? Atreus asked, in slight annoyance as he looked at this world's Greek goddess of love and beauty, completely unfazed by her obvious sex appeals. His father had warned him to be not that much different from the one that he knew in their old world, which basically meant that she was more or less the very embodiment of trouble itself. Or, why so cold? Have you already forgotten who is keeping you and your father out of the other gods' radar? Aphrodite asked playfully, placing her hands on her hips and making her tits wobble at the sudden movement as she gave Atreus a half-hearted glare, which he just scoffed a little back in response. No fun. Is it just me or are you starting to become more and more like your old man? Old and grumpy? I am not in the mood for game, Aphrodite. Atreus said simply to the love goddess, before widening his eyes and shooting his hands out to catch a bottle that Aphrodite tossed at him after making it appear from thin air. What is this? He couldn't help but ask, shaking it a little and feeling the movement of liquid inside. A gift. Of goodwill. Aphrodite answered as she pushed past Atreus and invited herself into his home, leaving the young god to pull the cap of the bottle out to take a sniff. Oh. Immediately, he had to rear his head back at the incredibly strong smell of alcohol coming from inside the bottle. What the hell is this stuff? Nectar, the drink of the Greek gods. Aphrodite answered simply, you will die with the bones being melted inside out if you drink it as a mortal, but since you are a god, it'd only get you so wasted you won't know who you are going to fuck stupid in the next 24 hours. Atreus just gave her a blank look. Geez, I'm only kidding. Well, thanks anyway, Atreus said, making Aphrodite wink at him playfully as he put the cap back on the bottle of wine and walked past her to head back into his house, pausing when he was about to enter the kitchen as he suddenly remembered the fallen angel girl on his dining table. Wait. Come with me, Aphrodite. There's something. Someone I want you to help me with. Oh sure, please lead the way. Aphrodite smiled and walked with Atreus into his kitchen, the farthest she had ever gone in his house ever. Good evening, Lady Aphrodite. Oh, hey Mimir, how are you? Oh my, what is going on here? The Greek goddess of love said with a light gasp when she saw the unconscious girl on Atreus' dining table. Before you get any wrong idea, it's not what you think it is. Atreus spoke up, clearing any possible misunderstanding. He had known Aphrodite for only a few months, but she had immediately appeared to him as an incredibly creative woman when it came to teasing, so it's best that he said it before she started to remind him why while she was helping them concealing their natures from the rest of the world, knowing full well how much chaos it would cause if they found out there were a god and another Loki from another world living right under their noses, both him and his father did not want her to just show up at their house uninvited. This fallen angel tried to kill a kid from my school, so I beat her and took the boy to a local hospital for medical treatment. Atreus continued as Aphrodite walked over to the unconscious fallen angel and examined her. I didn't know where to take her after coming back, so I took her back here. I see. Don't want her to go back to her friends or try to finish what she started, do you? Aphrodite asked, before she used her thumb and index finger to pick up the girl's wings, raising it a little up before saying 2 wings. She's a low-ranking fallen angel, so for whatever reason that she decided to kill that boy from your school, it can be from Azazel. Azazel? Leader of the fallen angels. Used to be quite cool back in the day, but he's a pain in the ass nowadays. Aphrodite answered simply as she put the wing down. So yep, she must be following Azazel's order or something like that, though it can be one of the other 3 leaders too. One thing I know is that it's rare for fallen angels to just go around and kill off humans nowadays. Interesting. Mimir said. Are you sure that the other boy didn't insult or offend her in any way? I honestly don't know. I came in when she stabbed him with a light spear. Atreus answered, making Aphrodite nod her head in understanding. Let's ask her. Can you use your magic and wake her up? Oh sure. Piece of cake. It appeared that the days of peace in this new world for Atreus had finally come to a stop. There, this should be enough, Atreus said as he finished tying the fallen angel girl up with some sort of golden chains Aphrodite had lent to him, binding her wrists together behind her back and her ankles to the front legs of a chair in the dining room. Her black wings were also secured firmly to her back, as he did not want to give her any chance of escape. You sure that these chains can hold her? They are made from the divine alloy that can even hold down the gods, so a low-class fallen angel like her shouldn't even be able to use her power. The Greek goddess of love answered, making Atreus nod his head to her before she asked, stepping forward. So, want me to wake her up now? Do it, Atreus said, making his way back to sit down at the dining table next to Mimir, allowing Aphrodite to walk toward the fallen angel girl and click her finger in front of her face. Almost instantly, the girl began to stir, her eyelids flickering briefly as she groaned in pain before slowly waking up. Well, this should be interesting. Mimir spoke simply to Atreus. Hey there. The young god greeted simply, raising one hand to wave a single time at her. Wah. Where am I? The girl asked in surprise while looking around, but the moment her eyes landed on Aphrodite and immediately became lost for words. Oh, whoa. She stuttered, looking as if she had completely forgotten how to speak coherently. Atreus could understand why she was reacting that way upon looking at Aphrodite, the most beautiful and most desirable goddess in all creation, no matter what world it was. He had seen mortals falling head over heels to the Greek goddess of love and beauty and becoming completely lost in her beauty the moment that they laid eyes on her, as her appearances in their eyes could change to perfectly fit the perception of beauty according to the person she was in the presence of and more. Being gods, Atreus and Mimir, as well as his father, saw her as who she was, a blonde-haired woman, dazzling eyes like pools of spring water and a smile that would have lit up the dark side of the moon. But this fallen angel girl might see her differently, depending entirely on her personal epitome of physical attraction. Mind stepping back? Atreus suggested, making Aphrodite spin around to smile at him while the fallen angel girl was still gawking at her beauty. But I like to be in the front, or underneath, you know. Aphrodite giggled flirtatiously as she skipped toward Atreus and leaned down a little to put an arm on his shoulder, her very large and firm breasts only a few inches from his face. The young god simply rolled his eyes at the lustful goddess before he looked back at the fallen angel girl in front of them, realizing that with Aphrodite moving out of the way, she could now see Mimir's head on the table, and that instantly made her face lose all of its color. What the fuck? Who are you people? Where the hell am I? She asked, shooting question after question at them while struggling against her bounds for the first time. Atreus could see light flickering from her palms, but no weapons were made. The chains were clearly serving their purposes. Release me. Do you know who I am? Well, we certainly know that you are a fallen angel with a horrendous sense of fashion. Aphrodite answered absently as she waved her hand dismissively at the girl while eyeing her outfit. I mean, even I wouldn't dare something like that in public. Most of the time anyway. She added, giggling playfully when Atreus looked at her, having seen her wearing even more revealing outfits than her current dress. Mimir just snickered, reminding the fallen angel of his presence and making her finally realize that he was actually a living head. That thing is alive? She asked in disbelief, almost shrieking in horror. How rude. I am not a thing, little girl. Mimir asked, looking quite offended before introducing himself, quite proudly. Do you know who I am? I am Mimir, the smartest man in all existence. I don't think she knows who you are, Mimir, Aphrodite said as the fallen angel girl just gave the talking head a what the fuck look. Enough. We are getting off topic. Atreus spoke up firmly, stopping Aphrodite and Mimir before either of them could say anything more. I want to know what happened earlier. Why did you try to kill that boy? Who is he? Atreus questioned, turning his attention back to the fallen angel on the chair in front of him. That's none of your business. The girl scoffed, huffing and looking away with a look of anger on her face. Atreus, who had fully expected her to give such an answer to his questions, picked up Mimir by the ropes that wrapped around his head, and moved it toward the girl's face, making her flinch and almost flipping the chair back in shock. What the hell is wrong with you? Get that thing away from me. You don't want to talk? Then how about we do the talking instead? Mimir, do you have anything to say to her? Atreus asked, the right corner of his mouth curving up into a smirk as he hovered Mimir's head closer to the fallen angel, making her lean to the side to avoid him. Well, would you like to know how I ended up as a bodiless head? The smartest man alive asked playfully, not even trying to sound scary as he dangled in front of the girl's face. His father beheaded me, and had someone bring me back using the darkest, most vile magic that involved. Milady. Okay, that's enough, you two. Aphrodite suddenly spoke up, snatching Mimir from Atreus' hand much to his surprise before tossing him back to the young man, making him catch it with both hands as the poorly animated Norse god cried out in surprise. Your interrogation skill really sucks. Why don't you let me do it? Sure, if you think you can do a better job than us. Atreus replied to the love goddess with a shrug, as he rolled Mimir's head around and placed the man back on the table. Watch me. Aphrodite winked playfully at the two, before she turned back to look at the fallen angel girl, who was doing her best to not openly stare at the love goddess. With a sweet smile, Aphrodite then moved a finger to her lip in a cute gesture, before speaking up and asking her, what's your name, girl? My name is Rainier. The girl answered, almost instantly. Atreus couldn't help but cock an eyebrow at that. It was as if the fallen angel just answered Aphrodite without her fully intending to do so. Even she looked surprised. Good. Aphrodite smiled before placing a hand on her hips. Now tell me, who was the boy that you tried to kill earlier today? His name was How do we say, a pervert. No, wait. Once again, the girl answered Aphrodite's question without even taking a second thought. This time, however, she seemed to have realized what she was doing, and shook her head to snap herself out of it before asking Aphrodite in surprise, stop it. What are you doing to me? I see. So this is Lady Aphrodite's famous charm. Speak. She's more our Aphrodite than I thought. Mimir spoke up in realization and then continued to explain when Atreus turned to look at him in curiosity, while Rainier gasped and looked at Aphrodite in shock, having recognized her name. Lady Aphrodite's voice has the power to hypnotize and persuade those she is talking to, bending them to her will and make them do whatever she wants. Only those who have strong, unbreakable wills are immune to this type of power, but even a god can be affected if they are not fully and openly resisting. I see. Well, even I can't explain it better, Aphrodite said as Atreus nodded his head in understanding. Though, he couldn't help but wonder if she had ever tried to use charm speak on him before. Given that he had never given in to her attempt to persuade him to just give it to her, did that mean that he had a strong, unbreakable will too? Like his father? Tell me, Mimir, did the other me try to use charm speak to bend every male god to her will too? Why yes, milady. Mimir answered with a humorous chuckle. You'll be surprised with how many gods there are who wish to do your bidding. Love is a dangerous weapon. It is. The love goddess smiled, before she turned back to Rainier and asked her now, be a good girl and answer Atreus' questions for me. I tried to kill Atreus because I believed he possessed a potentially dangerous sacred gear. Rainier answered, struggling not to do so, but it appeared to be in vain. A human with no talent like him will never be able to control a power of such caliber, and he will go berserk and become a dangerous threat to not just ours, but his world. For that reason, I have decided to eliminate him. Interesting. Mimir murmured. What is a sacred gear? Atreus couldn't help but ask, looking over to Aphrodite. It was his first time hearing it. They are artifacts with powerful abilities that are bestowed upon humans by the god of the Bible. Aphrodite explained. Atreus knew which god she was referring to, having done research on every pantheon this world had with Mimir the moment he could read and understand some of its languages. These abilities can vary from near instantaneous healing, doubling the power of the users, to granting its users the power to create weapons imbued with different attributes. But most of them are just normal sacred gears. The ones that are most powerful are the 13 Longinus, with each having its unique abilities compared to a normal one, and the power to slay even us gods. Sounds like something that comes straight out of the Pandora box, Atreus said thoughtfully, making Aphrodite tilt her head to the side in confusion. However, she decided to not ask about it just yet. So, does that mean Atreus has a Longinus sacred gear for you to decide he is a threat and try to eliminate him? I don't know for certain, but nothing good can come out of that boy. He's a shameless pervert who loves to hide in girls' locker room to peep on them while they are changing their clothes. Atreus' sweat dropped at that. He hadn't bothered himself to learn more about them just yet, but he had heard numerous rumors about an infamous group of 3 boys that were known as the Perverted Trio, who were said to have taken it on themselves to commit lecherous acts to the female students. It wouldn't be a surprise if Atreus was among them. Also, Azazel Summer himself asked me to keep an eye out for him. If he didn't possess a potentially powerful sacred gear, then Azazel Summer wouldn't have personally asked me to do it. Ah, so Azazel told you to do it. Figure. How is he nowadays? Aphrodite asked, but she didn't seem like she was expecting an answer from Rainier as she stood there and checked her perfect nails. Last I heard, the guy took an interest in sacred gears, especially the powerful ones. No wonder why he would ask one of his subordinates to keep an eye out for a potential possessor of a Longinus. So, I take that you went against his orders and made the decision to kill him yourself, Atreus said as he crossed his arms on his chest and looked thoughtfully at Rainier, who reluctantly nodded her head in response. Is there anyone else with you? How many fallen angels are there currently in this town? There are 3 others beside me, and a group of stray exorcists that follows us, Rainier answered, knowing that Aphrodite could just pry it out of her anyway if she refused to answer to him. There's really no point in keeping her mouth shut anymore. Can you let me go now? I promise I won't try to kill that kid again. Sorry, but I can't take you for your words. I don't care what other businesses you and your friends have in this town, since I doubt you need such a large group to watch over someone like him. Rainier looked at him in surprise at that, while Mimir couldn't help but smirk a little. But at the same time, I cannot let you guys just go around and do whatever you want, kill whoever you think might be a threat to you either. I do not care if that's how you fallen angels operate. There's lines that you cannot cross. What do you want us to do then? Atreus opened his mouth to answer her, but before he could do that, His ears picked up the sound of the front door of his house being opened. All four of them, including Rainier, then heard the sounds of footsteps, and turned their heads to the hallways to see the arrival of an imposing man, who stood at the height between 6 and 7 feet and had an athletic yet exceptionally muscular build. He had pale, almost ashen skin, a full but neatly trimmed beard, a scar on his right eye and a somewhat faded red tattoo on the left side of his face and going over his head. His clothing was that of a security guard, consisting of a light blue, button-up shirt that strained against the muscles of his torso, and a pair of dark blue pants with brown belt and silver buckle. In his left hand, the man held a hat with the logo of the security company that matched the color of his hand, and finished his outfit with a red tie and black shoes. Rainier widened her eyes as she stared nervously at the man, who stood at the kitchen door and looked at them with firm eyes, which then glanced over to the wings on her back. This man. He is powerful. She had become afraid of Atreus because he had a talking head of a man next to him, Aphrodite because she was just ridiculously beautiful and her voice could make her do things against her will. But this man, he made her scare of him just by being there, standing there, menacingly. "Ah, welcome back, brother." Mimir greeted the man cheerily. The man sighed after he had spent a couple of seconds to examine the scene before him, his deep voice coming out almost a rumbling grumble as he looked over at Atreus. "Have you gotten dinner, boy?" "Yes, father." "You?" Atreus asked back with a smile. "I already did," the man answered, before he just turned around and walked away without saying anything else. "Well, that went much better than I expected," Aphrodite commented once Kratos had left, not really cared that he had completely ignored her. The sound of him walking up the stairs could be heard. "He probably just wanted me to sort this out myself. And fast," Atreus told her with a shrug, knowing his father too well to not know what he wanted from him with just a look. "So, Aphrodite, can I ask you a favor?" "Oh, a favor? You are asking a god a favor?" Aphrodite asked, smiling sweetly at Atreus as she poked his cheek with a finger. "Are you sure about that? You know it's gonna cost you, right? Can you help me or not?" Atreus asked with a roll of his eyes. He knew very well that one could not simply ask a god for a favor and expect them to do it for free, especially one like Aphrodite. It's just that he knew getting a favor from her wouldn't cost him his freedom or anything as serious like his father had when he asked the Ares of their world for the power to destroy his enemies. "I need you to take this girl back to Azazel, her leader, and let him know what she did and that she went against his order." "Well, I certainly can do that." Atreus nodded his head to her before continuing in a firm tone. "You can also tell him that if any of his fallen angels here in this town try to cause any trouble, then I will not send them back to him in chains like this one here. As long as they can avoid that, I won't interfere with whatever business that they have here." Godhood was never a privilege that he could take advantage of. It was a responsibility, something that he had learned during his first adventure with his father, where they had journeyed across the 9 realms to fulfill his mother's wish. Even if he was a god, Atreus knew that it would be wrong for him to just assert his authority over others and make them do what he wanted, when they had all the rights to live and to strive for themselves just like any other species in this world. "Sure. That shouldn't be too much of a problem," Aphrodite said finally, nodding her head to Atreus before she bent over to smile seductively at him, flashing Atreus a very generous view of her almost bearing cleavage before continuing. "But of course, I will be expecting something from you in return. Just do what I ask you first, woman." Atreus scoffed lightly with a deadpan expression, making Aphrodite giggle into her hand before standing up and walking over to Rainier to untie her from the chair, using her magic to quickly do so. "All right, time for us to go, girl. The sooner we can get this over with, the better," the love goddess said and pulled Rainier up to her feet, still with her wrists being held in chains behind her back. "See you later, Atreus." "Mimir." "Milady," the head of the smartest man alive said, before Aphrodite raised her hand above her head and clicked her fingers, disappearing in a flash of pink light and leaving behind a trail of pink smoke and sparkles. "So, we got it sorted out then," Mimir then said, glancing over to the young god sitting next to him. However, there was an uncertainty in his tone that Atreus could detect and understand very well why. He just couldn't help but have the feeling that this problem was far from over, since he had felt a shift in Rainier's emotion when he asked Aphrodite to send her back to Azazel, becoming more worried than ever before. Whatever other business that she and the others had here in this town, it's probably not on his order. Atreus senpai. Looking up from the homework he was doing, and the dango that was a gift given to him by the girls of his class he was eating, Atreus found a handsome young man with short blonde hair and grey eyes standing in front of him with a friendly smile on his face. His outfit was the standard Kuo's boy uniform, which consists of a black blazer with white accents over a white, long-sleeved dress shirt with a black ribbon on the collar, matching black pants, and brown dress shoes. Atreus knew him, since he was literally the talk of many female students in the academy, including those from the upper classes. Likewise, he was also hated by the other male students. Kiba Yuto, Atreus said as he swallowed the bit of dango in his mouth, while the young man lowered his head a little to him, a standard Japanese act of respect for an upperclassman. How can I help you? He asked, glancing to the side to see many of his female classmates, and even some from other classes, were staring adoringly at Kiba Yuto. I am here on the behalf of my club's president, Ria's Gremory. She'd like to have a chat with you, the young man said in a pleasant tone, making Atreus raise an eyebrow at him in curiosity before he leaned down and continued in a much lower tone, as if he did not want anyone to hear. It's about what happened after school yesterday, senpai. Oh? Atreus' head perked up at that in interest. He had always had a feeling that there was more to some students of this school than meets the eyes, so maybe it's finally time for him to find out exactly what it was. You mind waiting a bit for me to pack up my things? Sure thing, senpai. Kiba answered, making Atreus nod his head to him before he started packing up, putting his books and notebooks in his backpack before standing up and following after Kiba. The two of them walked in a comfortable silence for the entire duration, with Atreus noting that they were heading toward the old school building, which obviously looked much older and had a slightly different style to its architecture than the main one, though the place looked very well maintained. This was where he had always had the feeling someone was looking at him from. Atreus continued to follow Kiba to the second floor of the old school building, where they stopped in front of a wooden door that looked more polished than the rest. Kiba then raised his hand to knock, and waited a few seconds for a voice beckoned them to come in to open the door and enter, stepping to the side to clear a path for Atreus to make his way in. Please come in, senpai, Kiba said, and Atreus gave the young man a nod of gratitude before walking in, taking a moment to look around the room. The place was clearly used to be a classroom, with the floors being made of wood panels. There was a chalkboard hanging on the wall behind a desk, with strange, but interesting symbols written on it. At the same time, on one side of the room was a chalk drawing of a large and complicated circle that seemed to radiate a strange form of energy, while on the other was a set of Victorian-style couches and tables. Currently sitting on one of the couches were a pair of young women, the first being a crimson-haired young woman, and second was a young bespectacled woman with a slim figure, black hair styled in a short bob cut and violet eyes. They were both dressed in Kuo girls' school uniforms but without their shoulder gape. Ah, it's you. That voice caused Atreus to look away from the two girls and over to one of the students standing and sitting on chairs behind them, recognizing him to be none other than the boy that he had saved yesterday. He also had no doubt that he had told the ones in this room everything that had happened the day before, hence why they wanted to meet him. Wow, you sure are energetic for someone who had a hole in his stomach yesterday. Atreus greeted him with a chuckle before asking, you okay? Yeah. The boy, how do we say, nodded his head rather uncomfortably at him as he said, thank you for saving me yesterday. You are welcome, Atreus said simply before he looked at the two girls sitting on the couches. So, I take that you two are the ones in charge of this little group here? He asked, making a gesture with his hand drawing a circle in the air as he looked around the room and nodded his head at the other students. Some of them he had seen before in the hallways, but never bothered enough to approach them hoping for a conversation. It also didn't help that they were always surrounded by students who adored them. Come to think about it, aren't they all the most popular students at this school? Atreus thought. Each one of us has our own group, but yes, you can say that we are the ones in charge, the black-haired girl said as she adjusted her class. I believe that we have met, Atreus-san, but my real name isn't Sona Shitori. It's Sona Saitri. Saitri. And my name is Ria's Gremory, Atreus-san. The crimson-haired girl introduced herself, before gesturing her hand to the couch across from her. Please, have a seat. Make yourself comfortable so we can talk. Nodding, Atreus removed his backpack from his shoulder and walked to his seat to sit down. Once he had made himself comfortable, the young god began, as the girl whose name he knew was Konohime stepped forward and began to serve the three of them tea. "So, I assume that you girls and everyone here are devils?" Atreus said, making everyone else in the room look at him in surprise. "Don't be so surprised. Sona did say that her real name was Citri. It's not that hard to come up with the conclusion when you are familiar with demonology." "Ah, I understand." Sona nodded her head in understanding. "Then I believe there's no reason for us to hold back." "Yes, Atreus-san, we here are all devils." They all sure did not look like devils to him, at least not like the ones that were described in the books he had read. But then again, who was he to judge? He had Jotnar blood flowing through his veins and he was by no means a giant. "What about him?" Atreus asked, referring to Issei with a gesture of his head. "Because I am pretty sure that he's a human yesterday." "Yes, he was, Atreus-san." Rias nodded her head as Atreus accepted his tea from Kano with a grateful nod. "But he accepted my offer to become a reincarnated devil a moment earlier, so I turned him into one. It was thanks to you that he survived the attack by the fallen angel Rainier yesterday." "I see," Atreus said as he sipped some tea from the cup in his hand. As soon as he had the first taste, the young god couldn't stop himself from taking another. The tea was incredibly delicious. "Whoa, this is delicious," he praised, smiling at Kano, who giggled softly into her hand as she replied to him. Thank you, Atreus-san." "Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions, Atreus-san?" Sona asked, and Atreus simply shrugged his shoulders at her in response. "What happened to the fallen angel Rainier after you saved Hyaru Issei-kun from her?" "I captured her and sent her back to her leader, the fallen angel Azazel, if I am not mistaken," Atreus answered simply as he drank half of his tea. "I take it you guys don't like her very much. Why have her here at this school then?" For Rainier to be able to keep a close eye on Issei, she obviously had to enroll herself in this school and spent her time long enough around Issei to earn his trust and to be alone with him. The scenario that he had found them in, beside all the blood and the BDSM outfit the fallen angel girl had been wearing at the time, was a dating scene that he could find in those romantic/drama movies that Mimir had been secretly watching, so obviously Rainier had been a student at Kyo for some time now. "At the time, we did not know her true intention," Sona answered. "Kyo Academy was built by our parents for us young devils, their children and our servants, to experience the normal school life, but we cannot stop those who wish to experience the same thing from joining, even if they are our enemies, the fallen angels. As long as they don't try to do anything to us, or cause any trouble to the people of this town, we have no wish to fight them. Not after both sides have lost so much in the Great War that went on for countless millennia and ended only hundreds of years ago." Rias continued her friend's words. "Was it the war that is mentioned in the Bible?" Both Rias and Sona nodded their heads at Atreus' question, allowing him to continue. "Does that mean the angels and the biblical God are also included?" "Yes, we are known by others as the three factions," Sona explained. "After the war, while there is no peace between us, outright battles did not occur either, and we have been in this state for a very long time. Nonetheless, we did not know the fallen angel Rainier, who was known by her classmate by the name Amano Yayuma, was specifically targeting Issei when she first showed up here. Only after we heard words of her asking him out on a date did we know she wasn't here to study." Rias continued. "'Cause he's the enemy of all females and it's hard to believe someone would want to date him, isn't it?" "Hey. Sorry kid, but it's the truth, whether you like it or not," Atreus responded simply to Issei's outburst, holding his teacup up to the perverted young man. "Well, you don't have to worry about her going after your ass anymore. At least, not anytime soon." "So she's sent back to her leader, the governor of Grigori, huh?" Sona asked as she crossed her arms on her chest and gave Rias a meaningful look before turning back to Atreus to ask, "Did she tell you anything else, Atreus-san? We know that our friends are in this town too, and as much as we want to avoid crossing our path with them, if they start any trouble, we will have to deal with them." "Not really." Atreus shrugged and then continued. "However, if I learn anything useful, you guys will be the first to know." "Thank you, Atreus-san." Rias smiled gratefully at him, making Atreus nod his head to them. "Another thing we wish to know is that." "What exactly?" "We know a fallen angel when we see one, and there are ghosts, demons, vampires and yokai in this school. If you don't mind, I would like to keep that piece of information for myself. Atreus interrupted, raising his hand to stop Riaz from continuing on with a soft chuckle. It's best that you guys don't know, and it's also quite complicated. Not to mention that he did not trust any of them enough to do that, and there's really no need for them to know that he was Loki from another world, who was probably an evil god in their eyes. However, I can let you guys know that I mean you and every student, every person in this town no harm. The young god then continued with a smile as he put his hand down. All that I want to do here at this school is to make my father proud with my academic study, so as long as you respect that and don't try any funny business like killing for sport or attempting world domination, then I am not your enemy. That's very good to know, Atreus-san. Riaz smiled brightly at him, feeling very satisfied with his statement in return. You are welcome to hang out with us whenever you wish. Despite what each one of us are, we are all students of QO Academy, so don't be a stranger. I will keep that in mind, Riaz. Atreus smiled, nodding his head to the crimson-haired girl. His first ever academic life might turn out to be far more interesting than he had expected. Alright, I guess that will be all for club activity today, Riaz Gremory announced before turning over to Atreus, who was once again spoiling himself with Kano's delicious cookies and green tea, which he had hailed as the most delicious snacks he had ever tasted and tried to have some every time he had the chance. I am sorry, Atreus-san, but we have an important job to take care of tonight, so I guess we will have to end our time here with you early. Oh, don't worry about it, Riaz. It's completely fine. The half-god half-Jotnar shook his head and gave the crimson-haired devil an assuring smile. 3 days. It had been 3 days since the afternoon Atreus became friends with the devils of QO Academy. Time seemed to have started moving much quicker than before now that he had something else to do at school besides just sitting by himself, either doing his homework or trying to learn something new. Atreus had to admit that the devils were pretty fun to hang around with. Since Sona and her group were the student council itself with a lot of important works to do around school, he spent most of his time with Riaz and her servants, the Occult Research Club. Sure, Atreus didn't trust any of them just yet, and he could see that they were still a bit wary of him, but aside from that there's absolutely no hard feeling, and they would just hang out with each other as fellow students of QO Academy. Atreus had also made it very clear that he respected their privacies and would leave them to their business when it's time, even though it's obvious that they were still keeping things from him. It turned out that not only Riaz was heiress of a pure-blood noble devil household, but she was also the little sister of the current leader of the devil faction, the Mao Lucifer. Obviously, the man wasn't the original Lucifer in the Bible, but one who had assumed his last name as a title when he became the leader of the devils. Riaz had been willing to share him the story of the Great Devil Civil War, the conflict between the descendants of the original Mao who wanted to assume the thrones of their ancestors and declared war on heaven and the fallen angels, thus restarting the Great War, and the anti-Mao faction that opposed them as they believed that another war would only lead the devil race into extinction. As someone who had started a war himself with his father to help and protect the people of his world, Atreus couldn't help but come to somewhat respect Riaz's brother as well as Sona's older sister, who had become the Mao Leviathan, and the anti-Mao faction for choosing to stand against their superiors and fight for their people. It was thanks to them that there was no more open conflict between the three factions, and the devils could start rebuilding themselves back from the ground while slowly working toward that peace. Speaking of rebuilding, apparently the devil faction had suffered a great loss in population in the aftermath of the Great War, but due to the extremely low rate of birth between devils, they couldn't possibly replenish their number in time, and thus the evil pieces system had been invented and introduced. It was the current Beelzebub who had created the system, which had the form of the 15 chess pieces, that allowed high-class devils to turn, or reincarnate, members of other races into devils. These reincarnated devils, however, would be viewed as servants of the high-class devils who had turned them, and in a society like the devil faction, they were normally looked down upon by other pure-blood devils, sometimes even by their masters, who deemed themselves superior because of their heritage. One of the only exceptions to this case seemed to be Riaz and her family, who were famous for their exceptional affection for their servants, as Kano had told him. Personally though, he would hate to become anyone's servant. His father's stories of his time being a slave to Ares still left a sour taste in his mouth whenever he thought about them. Nevertheless, because the evil piece system took the form of a set of chess pieces. Each member of the peerage, as they called it, assumed the role of the piece that was used to reincarnate them. For example, Kano was the queen of Rias, who was the king of her group. Kibayuto was the knight, and Atreus honestly thought it fitted him very well because he had seen the blonde-haired young man showing chivalric qualities as well as strong loyalty to his master. Konko Toju, a first-year student who was considered by many to be the mascot of Kyo Academy, was the rook in the peerage. Issei, meanwhile, was reincarnated as the pawn of the group, something that had caused his shoulders to slump in disappointment when Rias explained the roles of everyone in her group to him. Atreus honestly didn't think it was too bad, since there had to be more to the evil pieces system than that. Rias had yet to use all of her pieces, so there were more rooms for expansion in the future. Here you go, Atreus-kun. Kano giggled softly as she handed the young god a bag of her own baked cookies, which he would always request for the moment he stepped foot into the club room. Please enjoy. I will. Atreus grinned as he opened the bag a little to take a peek at the freshly baked cookies inside. He couldn't wait to share them with his father, who had been having some whenever he brought a bag like this home. He didn't say much, which was nothing new, but just the fact that he came back for a second and third ones showed how much he enjoyed them. He just wished that he could share them with Mimir too, but it was simply impossible because he did not have a stomach to digest the food anymore. Alright, it's time for us to go. Issei, leave your bag here. We will come back for them after we are done. Rias spoke to her newest servant, who nodded his head in understanding before putting the bag down next to his chair. The rest of her servants then gathered around her as Rias stepped onto the magic circle in the middle of the room, which then lit up and began to move slowly while radiating what Atreus had learnt was demonic power. Alright guys, I will be heading home too. Atreus said as he stood up and threw his backpack on his shoulder. See you guys on Monday. Take care. See you Atreus. Take care of yourself too. Rias smiled as Kano waved her hand at him, before the magic circle beneath them shone brightly and teleported them away, leaving Atreus alone in the club room. Finishing his green tea, Atreus wasted no time to leave the place and go home, wondering what he should do for the weekend. Maybe go fishing or hunting with his father? Yahoo! Atreus. Atreus sighed longingly, almost in disappointment when he walked into his house that night and saw that Mimir wasn't the only one there to welcome him home, but also Aphrodite, the troublesome Greek goddess of love and beauty, who he and his father had been stuck with since the moment they arrived in this realm. Mo, what was that reaction? Aphrodite pouted as she stood up from her seat with her hands on her hips. You aren't happy to see me? Do you know how long I have waited for you? Hello Mimir, anything interesting happened while I was at school? Atreus asked, completely ignoring Aphrodite and her question as he walked toward the refrigerator to grab for himself a cold drink, making the pout on her face increase further. However, as he walked past her, Atreus couldn't help but notice that Aphrodite was strangely more dressed today. The cream-colored trench coat she was wearing covered her body all the way from neck to just below her knees, revealing only that she was wearing thigh-high white stockings and high heels. Nothing for you to be concerned about, lad. Mimir answered with a chuckle. Oh, by the way, your father has to go on a business trip to another town with his crew, so he won't be back until next Wednesday. Is that so? Atreus couldn't help but ask. However, it wasn't the first time this had happened, so he wasn't surprised. Damn, and here I thought we could spend the weekend fishing again or something. Mo, can you please stop ignoring me? Aphrodite asked with her hands in the air, but she sounded more playful than frustrated. And how may I help you today, Aphrodite? Atreus asked with a humorous chuckle, turning to look at Aphrodite finally as he finished his drink. He knew very well why Aphrodite was here tonight, and he's actually more surprised that she hadn't come sooner. Well, I already did what you asked. I gave the girl back to Azazel, and told him to keep his fallen angels in line or else someone would do that for him, and it's not going to be pretty. The love goddess said, making Atreus nod her head at her in understanding. That's one way to do it. Even if Aphrodite had only told Azazel just that, it would still sum up pretty much everything that he wanted him to know. Alright then. Let's hope that he's half the leader I expect him to be and will act if his subordinates decide to do anything stupid. Atreus stated with a nod before asking Aphrodite, did he say anything? He was impressed that someone could actually make the goddess of love his messenger. I simply told him that you offered me something really nice in return, so I really couldn't say no. Aphrodite shrugged, smiling flirtatiously as her hand played with the lapel of her coat, moving it slightly back to reveal a small but teasing portion of her massive cleavage underneath. Oh dear, I think I know where this is going. With a forced chuckle, Mimir said, more to himself than to anyone. Oh, don't worry, Mimir, we are not going to do it here. Aphrodite turned around and gave the reanimated head of the smartest man alive a playful wink this entire house won't be able to hold, you know. Can I say no this time? Atreus couldn't help but ask. You know it doesn't work like that, boy. And before you start wondering, it is even more serious if you are a god yourself. The love goddess stated, faking the seriousness that could be heard in Kratos' tone as she addressed him the same way before leaning toward him, placing a hand on his chest. So, I assume that you are free for the next couple of days? Before he could answer the question, Aphrodite pushed him with the hand on his chest. Atreus would have been able to instantly recover, if the love goddess hadn't casted her teleportation magic on both of them, causing the world around Atreus to spin suddenly and making him lose his footing. In a blink of an eye, however, the half-god half-yacht now found himself falling on an incredibly soft and comfy surface. Quickly placing his hands behind him so he wouldn't land on his back, Atreus looked around and saw that he was no longer in the kitchen of his home, but an extravagant-looking bedchamber. The room was large and circular, with large marble columns lining up near the walls. The floor was formed of a green material with a mirror polish, giving a clear view of every corner of the room, while lanterns, candles and floating orbs of light burned and shone a pleasant, but not glow over the proceedings. The bed itself, which had a seashell-like design, was surrounded by red curtains, and standing atop a platform with a staircase and a pink carpet leading up to it in the middle of the room. At the same time, the ceiling overhead gave the feeling of the starry night sky, glittering with constellations. Where are we? Atreus couldn't help but ask, feeling more amazed than surprise or shock. My bedchamber. Aphrodite answered as she stood in front of him with a seductive smile on her face and one hand whirling a curvy lock of blonde hair. We are on Olympus, he said, and it wasn't a question. Olympus, the home of the Greek gods. All that Atreus had ever known about Mount Olympus of his world were from Mimir's stories, because the place had been annihilated by the deaths of several Greek gods at the hands of his father. In this world, however, the gods of the Greek pantheon were still alive and well, allowing their homeworld to continue standing and flourishing far beyond what its counterpart of his world could ever be. Of all the places Aphrodite could have brought him to. Oh, don't worry, no one will know you are here today. Not even my handmaidens. She shook her head and assured him while her hands were slowly undoing the belt around her waist that were securing the coat to her body. Even while you are here, no one will be able to tell that you are a god with my charm still intact. So relax, and enjoy yourself. And with that, Aphrodite unbuttoned her coat and let it open to the sides, revealing to Atreus that she was completely naked underneath, with the only other thing beside her stocking and heels were a sparkling belly chain that dangled just below her toned midriff. With a casual air about her, Aphrodite then lowered her hands down to push her coat fully back, letting it frame her lewd body from behind like a work of art before putting her hands on her bare hips, her huge tits wobbling slightly on her chest as she parted her thighs and struck a sexy pose before Atreus with the pouty lips of her hairless pussy on clear display. Such a sight would drive most men insane with lust, just as easy as Aphrodite could make them fall for her with a smile. But Atreus was not like most men. He was a god with strong, unbreakable will, and for that reason, he only found himself staring at her body in silence to drink it in. It was at that moment that Atreus was reminded that she was just as much of a goddess of sex, as one of love and beauty. She looked, in a word, fuckable. So, you are naked the whole time? Atreus said, and for some reason, he wasn't as surprised as he should have been. How shameless can you possibly be? Aphrodite giggled, raising her hands into the air above her head as she announced proudly, I am a goddess, boy. I can do whatever I want. That sounds like something evil I would say. Or did say. Atreus hated to admit it, but he was a dick back when he first learned of his godhood. Well, he sounds like someone who will know what to do in this situation. The love goddess said as she lowered her arms down and let her coat fall to the floor before climbing onto the bed to straddle his lap, her hands moving out to play with the collar of his shirt. Do you? Atreus said nothing in response, as he grabbed her wrists and turned them around. Aphrodite let out a soft laugh as she then found herself on her back with the young god from another world laying on top of her, pinning her down before grabbing at one of her very large breasts. Well, you certainly know what you are doing. Aphrodite moaned as Atreus groped her, sinking his fingers deep into her heavenly soft flesh and then pinching her nipple between his index and middle fingers. Not to be outdone by him, Aphrodite reached down with her left hand and slipped it under his pants, grabbing at the semi-erected length of his member as she flicked them around again, this time with her on top before crashing her lips against his, kissing him hungrily. The two explored each other's body as they kissed, with Aphrodite feeling very pleased, and a lustful excitement as she worked the massive tent pole that was his hardening cock. Aphrodite didn't waste any time to part her lips, and Atreus took this as a clear invitation to slip his tongue into her mouth. Her tongue danced with his as she kissed back at him eagerly while his hands continued to paw at her body. After a moment, the kiss ended, with Aphrodite slurping up a strand of saliva, connecting their tongues together and licking playfully at his bottom lip. I think it's time for us to have some real fun.
That's it. Please comment for a part 2.